Welcome back to another episode of the Pax She Said podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Maggie Loney, joined as always by Perry Goldstein. Not sure anybody listening has fingernails. What a nail biting game. I mean, incredible game for the Packers to snatch away at the very end. But I want to talk about it. We're here to talk about it because it should not have been as close as it was, and the fact that it did get close was very concerning. And the Packers pulled it out, and now they are 5-2. The Vikings had their first loss to the Lions, so the Vikings and Lions both 5-1. The Bears on a bye week at 4-2. So Packers needed this one to stick in a
Yeah.
really, really tight NFC North, and thankfully they did it against one of the better teams in football. So, Perry, what are your initial thoughts on this one, other than waiting for your heart rate to return to normal?
My heart is going like a mile a minute right now, that end. My God. I have so many takeaways from this game. One is like the Packers beat themselves in this
Yes.
game. I mean, they really did. Like the Texans got all their points off of turnovers. The Packers gave them too many turnovers and too good a field position. That's number one. Defense looked great. I mean, they did everything to keep the Packers in this game, and I think they deserve the win in this game. And we can dive into like what they looked like and how and why. But the defense did absolutely everything that they needed to do, especially when the offense was struggling in the second half with too many 3-and-outs. My third takeaway is we have not necessarily seen Jordan Love lead game-winning drives within the 2-minute drill in his time as the Packers like franchise leader. And quite frankly, that's really important.
Mhm.
It's a really important skill to have. And I think this is the first one that we've really seen. Obviously, they only need to get in field goal range, and he was able to do it. It wasn't pretty. They got an offsides out of it. Don't care. Just get the ball down the field in range for your kicker. And he did it. So he didn't turn the ball over. We've seen him do that in these kind of like where he tries to go superhero ball. Almost did in the first pass, but he didn't, right? So I think also that was huge, and that must feel really good for his confidence. And damn, new kicker won the game, Brandon McManus. Don't have much more to say about that, but just a not beautiful win, but they got the win, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. I mean, I think that people that follow the show know how we feel about the kicking situation in general, or I should say the kicker in the room, but certainly a different feeling for the Packers to have somebody that they know is comfortable, at least, inside like 50 yards, that game winner being obviously 45 yards. And even kind of to see the replay of the kick, that was a really bad snap. So kudos again to Daniel Whelan, who kind of remains like the MVP of special teams for
Yes.
righting the ship and holding that appropriately for McManus to squeak that kick in there. But if the Packers are able to reliably count on a couple extra field goals a game that they didn't have previously, that's a win for this team. And I think, one of our takeaways from this one was that we thought it would be really high scoring. We thought they would put up a lot more points than they did, both teams. And it ended up just being a defensive shootout. Like, this was a really stout performance from the defense. And we talk about it every week, right? This was my overall takeaway from the game. Can the Packers defense win without generating turnovers? And they did. And I think that was just a really good testament to what this defense is, because as fun as it is to watch them get 3 turnovers every single week, that's not always going to happen. So it's really
Yes.
important to know that, the Texans opening drive, they get into the red zone and we're like, well, it's automatic. The Texans are the first or the number 1 rated offense in red zone scoring, and they stuff them and hold them to a field goal. So like those things I think are just really important and go a long way for the confidence of this defense and the confidence that we have in Jeff Hafley.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, evidently, they can. They sacked CJ Stroud, what was it? 4 times? Yeah, 4 times. Xavier McKinney got in there. Rashawn Gary finally got a sack, first time since week 1. And then your guy, Eric Wilson, twice. So bringing the blitzes, bringing creative pressure, but just in general, I thought the Packers pass rush like was really the star of the show in this game, and allowed the DBs to do a great job covering these Texans wide receivers and tight ends. The Texans' entire offense in this game was Joe Mixon, like their entire offense. He had 125 yards, 115 yards, sorry. And everyone else had, I mean, Dalton Schultz had 1 catch for 28 yards, and that was the max of any pass catcher. And CJ Stroud only threw for 86. Like, this game should not have been as close as it was. And it was only close because the Packers offense and special teams, due to turnovers, gave them really good field position. Like, the defense played extraordinarily well given the circumstances. And again, they just need to have all of the kudos for showing up in the big moments.
Yeah, and I mean, we knew like CJ Stroud was one of the better quarterbacks that they had seen this season. Even without having Nico Collins, he still had Stephon Diggs, he had Tank Dell, he had Joe
Yeah.
Mixon, he had Dalton Schultz. Like, he had plenty of weapons around him. And we had said, like, the Packers offense is capable of putting up points, especially against a really depleted Texan secondary, down 2 starters. Both of their inside linebackers were out. So we expected this to be a shootout, and it didn't end up that way. And I think, like you said, that's a huge testament to the Packers defense to hold a quarterback like CJ Stroud to 86 yards. They were 4 of 13 on third downs, which is also incredible because how many times have we seen in previous weeks it's like 3rd and 12 and the opposing offense picks up like 14. They do just enough. And for the
Yeah.
Packers defense to get home, and it looks like Quay has a concussion. We'll see, how long he has to recover from that. But to be without a starter and to have, Eric Wilson come in and play as well as he did in spot duty, like, it was just an all around really impressive performance. Evan Williams was in there. Xavier McKinney got a sack. Like, you couldn't really have asked for more from the defensive front. And like you said, making CJ Stroud really uncomfortable all game too. 4
Yeah.
sacks, but a ton of pressure beyond just the sack numbers.
Yeah. A lot of interior pressure up the middle. I think everyone got involved, just like, even if the numbers won't show it, like Kenny Clark was in there, LVN was in there, Rashawn Gary was in there even more than just his sack. He was all over CJ Stroud all game in a way that, like, you hope that your highest paid edge rusher is. So even the line, I love the way the linebackers are playing in this Jeff Hafley defense. Also, like, they're getting involved in pressure. We mentioned Eric Wilson already, but Edge Cooper as well, really involved. But I think also, like, the story of the day is just like, yes, Joe Mixon got his yards, but they made major, major stops in the run game when they needed to too. A ton of tackles for losses. The biggest one, obviously, in the game-ending drive where they held them to the field goal right before the Packers got the ball back in the 4th quarter. So they're making stops and they're making plays when they need to and in the big moments, like I said before, when historically, I don't know if we've always seen Packers defenses do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that was the big takeaway is we're all, screaming on our couches, get a turnover, get a turnover. They didn't need one, right? It was just really methodical stops, back them up, put them in like 2nd and long, 3rd and long situations where they have to then throw the ball, and they settle for a field goal, and that's how the Packers end up winning that game. If
Yeah.
they throw the ball and they end up picking up that first down, it's game over. They're kicking a really chip shot field goal, and the Packers probably don't get the ball back. So just everything you'd want from the Packers defense in this one. And keep going back to the fact that CJ Stroud had 10 completions all game for 86 yards. Just incredible. Just a really phenomenal
Yeah.
performance from that Packers defense.
Yeah. And like it maybe didn't pass the eye test because the game was so close and
Right.
It kept swinging back and forth who took the lead, but I kind of had a feeling that's how this game would go either way, whether it was a shootout or not. These teams are very well matched. They're both, potential Super Bowl contenders and definitely playoff contenders. And you knew that it was going to swing this way. Now, obviously, as a fan of one of these teams, it's not the way you want it to go. I think anybody watching this game with absolutely zero rooting interest probably had a lot of fun watching this game. But I in no way, shape, or form thought that this was going to be any kind of blowout. So the fact that it was close all game was not necessarily a shock. And then it came down to a field goal felt right for like who these two teams are. The one thing that did surprise me though, and this is not where I thought we would go, but we can talk about it before we switch to the offense maybe, is like how chippy this game was. And you and I talked about this, like we were chatting about this during the game. I know that the history between Jair and Stephon Diggs stems way, way back to when Stephon was with the Vikings, but it really just spread. Like they were chatting and then Nixon got involved pregame and then it just turned into like, now these teams hate each other. And I don't know if it just really added to the way this defense was playing, but there was so much trash talk. And I think it really like worked in favor of the Packers DBs. Like they play really aggressive football and they play really aggressive football well. Like that's like their
Yeah.
brand. And I felt like they really clamped down on these receivers hard. I mean, they, like you said, CJ Stroud had 10 completions. Nobody had over 30 yards and they really couldn't get like any rhythm going in the pass game. And again, it's not to say that I want this moving forward as much as I enjoy it, because it's a little bit of a slippery slope, right? You don't know if you're going to draw a flag anywhere, but I think in this particular matchup, it was kind of fun to watch this defense be aggressive and not be the defense that you can get pushed around on, because again, historically, this defense has been a team that you can get, like, nobody's scared of them, right? Isn't that what
Mhm.
Robert Saleh said a few seasons ago? Like, we're not scared of them. Well, now they have the attitude where like you should be, right? Because look at what we can do to you.
Yeah, I kept trying to think about it during the game because again, it doesn't like they've played 6 times. The Texans are an expansion franchise. It's not like their history goes back the way that it does with the
Mhm.
Bears or the Vikings. Like it's a really weird rivalry to have with an AFC team that you see once every 4 years. But I think maybe part of it is the narrative that the media set, right? It's Jordan Love, it's CJ Stroud. They both kind of were competing last season for like who's going to have the better like debut season as a starting quarterback and like you know, the AFC team to beat could be the Texans. The Packers are one of the teams to beat in the NFC. So, like, I don't know if that's just one of those things where it's like competition breeds into like this rivalry. I
Yeah.
like it. Jordan
Yeah.
Love and CJ Stroud is going to be a premier matchup for as long as both of them are in the league. So it makes sense. It's like, when Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady get to play, we hope, that that's the kind of caliber you see out of both of these quarterbacks long term. But like, yeah, it just felt very out of place for a Texans team to come to Green Bay with the kind of chip that they had with them.
Yeah, I agree. But it's funny too because CJ Stroud and Jordan Love, as we've learned over the course of this week, are quite good friends.
Mhm.
Like they've known each other since their days in high school days in California. They have the same agent. So like the fuel to this is everyone else around them. The two of them have like a lot of love and mutual respect for one another, which is I think how it should be between two like elite quarterbacks. And then the rest of their team like kind of goes to war for their guy. It was just a very kind of like old school, not dirty because everyone like played clean, but like, you know what I mean? Old school angry football game.
I want to talk about Jordan Love because I think that it's a really interesting dynamic. And I saw a really funny picture. I wish I remembered, who had tweeted it about Jordan Love having an angel and a devil on his shoulder, right? And Aaron Rodgers is the angel protecting the football, and Brett Favre is the devil who's like, eat it, just, just throw it up there.
Chuck
And
it.
we joked about Jordan Love being a really good marriage of the two quarterbacks that came before him. And I think part of the critique of Jordan and the interceptions isn't necessarily that he's throwing the interceptions. It's that we as Packer fans became so used to Aaron Rodgers never, ever, ever turning the ball over that it's still hard for us as fans to like wrap our brains around a quarterback throwing picks because it was rare to see Aaron Rodgers throw picks. And Jordan Love now leads the league in interceptions, but he also threw 3 touchdowns today and also leads the league in touchdowns. So it's like this really
Yeah.
interesting balance. Like, where do you stand on the Love picks?
I actually don't agree that I find like I don't agree with the narrative that like, oh, we're not used to picks. Like the picks don't bother me. It's the decision making.
Okay.
Like I can respect that first pick because the safety just made a really good play. And like in if the defense makes a really good read, good on you, right? Like you're gonna get them. But then there's moments where Jordan throws into double coverage where he doesn't need to. And that's where I get annoyed. And that's where I wish the Aaron Rodgers angel on his shoulder, if we're sticking with this metaphor, took over and said, you don't have to throw the ball there. You can go to your next read, or you can just throw the ball away. Like sometimes something we never see Jordan do is throw the ball away. And it's something that we used to get very angry at Rodgers doing, I think, a little too often. But it also can't be understated that, like, wasting a down is better and keeping a drive alive than throwing a pick like that into double coverage. So I think there needs to be kind of a less of a conversation around, well, oh, we're just used to his predecessor. Yes, that's true. But I can live and die by Jordan Love throwing picks if a defender just like beats him,
Mhm.
with a good coverage, or just a good read, but I can't live by Jordan making just a bad decision that's very clear. And you're like, I don't understand what you're seeing there when it's just like double coverage and your guy is not open. That's kind of where I fall with the interceptions.
And I think the stats are really tricky because we saw last week, obviously, Bo Melton slipped and that ball went right to a Cardinals defender. Like, that's not on Jordan Love. There was the game a couple weeks ago where there were like 3 tipped balls for interceptions. And, those things historically, like tip drills, don't normally count against a quarterback. They do on the stat sheet, but you don't chalk that one up to a bad decision by the quarterback. So I think
Mhm.
that also is what makes it tricky because yes, he has more picks than we're probably used to seeing from a Packers quarterback in recent memory. But like you said, some of those are unavoidable, and some of those, the ones that are avoidable, are the ones that you want him to clean up. And I think that's a fun conversation for Matt LaFleur and Tom Clements to have. And I think that's one of those things too
Yes.
where you're a young quarterback and you're guilty of wanting to make a play. And even veteran quarterbacks do it. So I don't think it's necessarily like any long-term concerns for him, but I think it is something that when he puts on the film, it's like, okay, maybe some of these decisions, maybe they're warranting a third read or a second read
Yeah.
instead of just your initial shot. Um, Something else that really stood out to me about this game was the fact that it was just so even. Time of possession was almost even. Penalty yardage was just about even. The Packers for, losing the turnover differential 3-0 really like I think that just goes to show how much they outperformed the Texans. Both teams were not great on third down. It was like really a sloppy game, but
Yeah.
even on all of the stats except for like yardage, like the
Yeah.
Packers
Yeah.
dominated when they
Yeah.
needed to, and it was just so close when it didn't need to be close at all.
I know. I mean, total yards, they won. Passing yards, they had more. Obviously, rushing yards, the Texans won in that category, but I really think without the turnovers, there's no question who wins this game.
Right.
And that's where I think I understand the frustration with the Jordan Love picks because look, you are the purveyor of the football. You are the guy who's supposed to control and protect the football. And when you are not doing that, you're putting your team at risk. So
Especially when
it
you're doing that
helps.
and then going 3 and out. I think that's also the difference.
Exactly,
Like
exactly. Like, yes, does it help that he's throwing multiple touchdowns a game? Obviously, like, that's the only reason why they're winning, right? Is because he's backing his interceptions with touchdowns, and if he continues to do that, they're probably going to win games, but also, at some point, these are going to catch up with them, and like you just mentioned, I'm glad you brought that up because that was my next point, which is, like, the entire second half, besides the game-winning field goal drive, was 3 and outs. Like, this offense just in spite of the defense holding them up, really didn't play complementary football or like hold up their end of the bargain in this game. They needed one of those 3 and outs to be some kind of scoring drive, to be honest, to just put some cushion, and they couldn't do it. And part of it to me was play calling. Like, part of it, there were certain moments where I was like, Josh Jacobs is like pounding the rock all game. Like, why are we calling an end around on 3rd and 1?
like
When
that
he can he can easily get that yard in this game. So, yes, it's not all on Jordan Love. Some of it is the play calling, but that's why this is a team sport. Um, again, I feel confident in the offense that they can clean these things up, but we keep saying that, and now we're
right, and
going into, middle of the season zone, and I'm like, when? When?
yeah. So let's talk quickly before we wrap the recap up. Game balls. Who gets a game ball from you for this performance?
I mean, there's a few guys. I I think you want to give yours to Eric Wilson, so I'll let you talk about Eric Wilson. I mean, Josh Jacobs, you have to give it to him. I mean, he was key in this win. I think without the Packers dominating the run game, like, or dominating time of possession, and a lot of that was his explosive runs, you don't see this game end the way that it did. He also got his very first receiving touchdown of his entire career, and that was really fun to watch. He is like everything that was promised when they signed him. And I honestly wish they used him more in this game, to my earlier point. I think they could have kept pounding him like between the tackles, and he could have had more yards than just his 76.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's in a really interesting position because if you just looked at him, after the Colts game, obviously the stats were kind of skewed because he was the game plan. And he was like leading the league in yards, or like top 3 in yards after the first couple weeks of the season because it was Malik Willis. Now they have Jordan Love, and he's not being asked to carry the ball 20, 30 times and go for over 100 yards a game. Like, he has the capacity to do that if they want to lean on him to do that. But Jordan Love wants to sling it. And Jordan
Yeah.
Love has enough weapons that he's going to sling it. So it was very cool to see, like you said, Josh Jacobs get his first receiving touchdown. But for what he's being asked to do, he's very good at it. But yeah, I think if you were just like, kind of casually looking at the stats, you'd be like, they're not getting a ton out of him. But it's just what the game plan calls for in any given Sunday. And, for the Packers and for Jordan Love, the game plan normally is slinging it because that's what they can do with Jordan Love. But yeah, I want to give my game ball to Eric Wilson. I think just coming in, for Quay Walker, we weren't sure what that would look like, and we weren't sure who it was going to be. Cooper was in there a little bit. It was Isaiah McDuffie. But I loved Eric Wilson last season, was so happy when the Packers brought him back, and then wasn't really sure what his role was going to be with 2 drafted picks, to have Quay still kind of, in there wearing the mic. And he just played so well. You mentioned it, multiple sacks, some run stuffs, was kind of everywhere they needed him to be. And it's just nice to see the depth the Packers have, because we talk about, maybe concerns with like corner depth in certain places. And we talk about, inside linebackers needing to play a little bit better. And he came out there and just had an exceptional performance as a backup and played a bunch on special teams as well. So he'll get a game ball from me for that. And we also, at the same time, will hope that Quay comes back soon, because concussions are just no joke.
Yeah. And honestly, I thought the run game, like the run defense suffered when Quay went out, to be honest. So Eric Wilson played great. I mean, 3rd in the team in tackles as well, just like shoots up gaps with so much speed for a guy of his like size and age. And to your point, like, we didn't even know if he was going to make the roster this season, and he's in there making plays, and just like very much the next man up mentality kind of guy, just very dependable. And I see why this team, both Matt LaFleur and defensive coaches, like, absolutely love him. I have 2 more game balls in mind, and I wonder if you agree with me on both of them. But mine is going to go to Romeo, and Romeo Doubs was by far and away the leading receiver in this game. Almost had 100 yards, 8 catches, 95 yards. And he was just so dependable. Again, this offense did not have their best day, similarly to the Texans, although not nearly as bad. Had a hard time finding a rhythm, and I feel like he came up with important catch after important catch after important catch, like big hands game for him. And on top of that, I think you and I talked about this pre-show, but I just felt like it said so much that the Texans had they're missing how many starters? 5 starters, including guys in the secondary. And they had Derek Stingley Jr., their best corner, basically shadow Romeo Doubs all game. Like, that was it. They did not go after anybody else. And he still had almost 100 yards on Stingley, who is a good DB. So just like big game from Doubs, especially we're still bouncing back from whatever the hell happened a few weeks ago. And he's just doing an exceptional job.
And that's what I was going to say too, is like the weight of everything. You could tell after the last game that it was still kind of weighing on him a little bit, and he was still not super comfortable talking about it, which is fair. But just the trust that the offense has in him, that Jordan has for him, like in big moments, he looks for 87 still. And 87 normally delivers. And I think that, as a a really big testament to the offense and what he means to the offense and what he means to the receiving core. I'll give my second game ball to Evan Williams. I
That was
think that
mine.
I think every
Yeah.
week that he could probably get a game ball at this point because he's just playing so incredibly well. Really has locked up that opposite spot with Xavier McKinney. Javon Bullard, I think, still looks really good in the slot. I like the way the defense is playing right now. And I think Evan Williams is just a star in the making. He is somehow always around the ball. He's always in the backfield. It is just everything that the Packers were hoping to get out of their rookie class. And another gem on day 3 for Goody.
He is a star, like a bona fide star. Led the team in tackles in this game again with 9. Saved the 2-point conversion, which ended up being the game pretty much for the team. So just he's PFF's highest graded safety in the league right now. Like, he is a star. Yeah. Game ball.
Absolutely. Anyone else that you want to mention? Anyone that is trending in a not great direction that you're concerned about, or just chalk this one up to a win? Packers at 5-2, and we're on to the Jaguars.
We're talking this up to a win, but I'm still concerned about special teams. They had a really bad game, like a really bad game. I mean, you can't muff, you can't miss catches. Like, you catch it when you shouldn't, and you don't catch it when you shouldn't. And it's like, what are we doing here? I mean, it's been how many seasons now with Rich Bisaccia, and I am deeply concerned. One of those turnovers was because one of their stars Keyshawn Nixon is their star, and you should be, and again, it hit Corey Ballantyne, whatever, but Keyshawn should be dictating what's happening back there, and he messed up. So I don't know what's happening with the coaching situation, what they're doing, what they're practicing, but something has to change.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think that's the biggest concern moving forward. We'll see what's next for the Packers. Obviously, they travel to Jacksonville to take on another AFC South team, wrapping up that division with the Jaguars, who won in London today against the Patriots. Like we said earlier at the top of the show, Bears on a bye week, Lions beat the Vikings. So things are just still really hotly contested in the NFC North, and the Packers need to keep their foot on the gas. So the win today against the Texans surely did help that.
Yeah.
Packers are 5-2. It's a great time to be a Packer fan. Winter warning game looked awesome. We didn't say that, but very cool to see the whiteout in the stands. Fans came through at Lambeau. That was great. And I thought the white jerseys looked really cool at Lambeau.
I love the color rush. The white color rush are some of my favorites. So I think they looked fire.
Yeah. So we'll see Packers at Jags next week, and then take on the Lions, and then settle in for their bye week. So interesting game coming up against another unfamiliar opponent, and then things get real with the Lions, a bye week, and then the Bears. So stick around. We'll have all of the coverage for that later on this week. Thank you, as always, for listening to the show. You can find the podcast on Twitter at PWSS Podcast, Perry_Goldstein, me at Maggie J. Loney. If you're listening on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe to the show if you don't already. We would really appreciate it. And if you're listening on Spotify or watching on Spotify, make sure that you support the show if you love what we're doing, or anywhere you listen to your favorite audio podcasts. Thank you, as always, for listening to the show. Enjoy Victory Sunday and enjoy Victory Monday, because it was a hard-fought win for Green Bay. And go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.